This is a Baltimore City Council Budget and Appropriations Committee. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. We are here tonight for two bills. Council Bill 20-0527, Ordinance of Estimates for fiscal year ending June 30, 2021, and Mayor and City Council Resolution 20-0533, Operating Budget for the Baltimore City Board of School Commissioners for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2021. I am Councilman Eric Costello from the 11th District, Chair of the committee. I am joined this evening by Vice Chair of the committee, Councilman Leon Pinkett, 7th District, Councilwoman Mary Pat Clark, 14th District, Councilwoman Shannon Sneed, 13th District, Vice President of the Council, Councilwoman Sharon Green Middleton, 6th District, Councilman Bill Henry, 4th District, Councilwoman Danny McCray, 2nd District, Councilman Zeke Cohen, 1st District, Council President Brandon Scott, Councilman Isaac Yitzi Schleifer, 5th District, Councilman Ryan Dorsey, 3rd District. We also have Matt Stegman and Nina Themlis on behalf of Mayor Jack Young. In addition, we have Kaylin Young, Dominic McAlilly, and Rebecca Simmons on behalf of Council President Brandon Scott. And finally, we have Marguerite Curran, who is staff to the committee. Dr. Santolises, I'm going to turn it over to you for your presentation. In chambers with us today is Dr. Sonia Santolises, who is the CEO of Baltimore City Public School System, as well as Melissa Broom, who heads up government relations for the school system. Doc, floor is yours.
I know you would think I would have it by now, sir. Thank you so much, Chairman Costello. I want to thank our Baltimore City Council for having this opportunity tonight to present our proposed fiscal year 21 budget and to receive questions from our city's city council. I would like to acknowledge the presence of our Board of Commissioners Chair, Board Chair Linda Chinia, who is with us this evening virtually. Also, I would like to acknowledge members of my staff who will be here to provide even more detail for any questions from City Council that I might not necessarily have as much detail on. So I would like to thank Chief of Staff Allison Perkins Cohen for being here, our new Chief Financial Officer, Chris Doherty, our Deputy Chief Financial Officer, Marianne Cox, who's been doing yeoman's work as interim this past year and for years prior. I also have with us today our Chief Operating Officer, Dr. Lynette Washington, our Chief of Communications, Engagement, and Enrollment, Tina Hike Hubbard, our Chief of Human Capital, Jeremy Grant Skinner, our Chief of Schools, John Davis, our Director of Strategy and Continuous Improvement, Sarah Heaton, and our Government Relations team with Melissa Broom and Dewana Starrett. So thank you again. And I will begin with some opening remarks with our opening slide. I just want to know where I should be looking for the slide presentation, Chair. Thank you very much. And thank you, Deputy Chief Cox. So we will beginning now want to, just before we dig into this year's budget, I do think it's important just to restate what I'm sure, clearly our city government and the city council in particular understand, but also our community understands, and that is to acknowledge the magnitude of the fiscal uncertainties that we currently face. We recognize that the full financial impact of COVID-19 on state and city budgets cannot be forecast with total accuracies, but we do know, based on our discussions both across the state of Maryland as well as with other urban school districts across the country, that we do believe it is very likely that the financial impact will in fact be significant. While we are grateful, and I need to state that, we are very grateful that neither the state nor the city have made any serious reductions to the FY21 funding projected to city schools. We do know that the city has indicated a reduction of in-kind services related to risk management, which will result in an increase in cost to the district of between $5 million and $11 million. In addition, the recent veto of the Kerwin legislation adds another layer of uncertainty, pending actions by the General Assembly in January 2021 and beyond. I had the privilege of being part of a team that presented to the House Appropriations Committee earlier today, and they are also, city delegation is also very aware of this reality. Given these uncertainties, excuse me, City Schools is making every effort to be very careful stewards of our resources. We will continue to have a focus on organizing the use of our available revenue while considering spending reductions that are necessary to facilitate long-term financial stability. Our goal is unchanged in the sense that we want to ensure that Baltimore City students will receive the support necessary to accelerate their learning during the current period of uncertainty and into the future. We know that this budget before you does not reflect the potential impact of financial decisions that may become necessary, and any future adjustments will be made through our reallocation process. So the 2021 school year budget really continues to be driven by the Blueprint for Success and our community feedback. The focus on student wholeness, literacy, and leadership continues, but clearly within the current context has almost a different context in which it's taking place. I had the privilege just about an hour ago to address first-year teachers in city schools, and overwhelmingly they were celebrating what was their first year while acknowledging the challenges of really making sure that our students are kept whole during this challenging time, both with regards to the racial equity issues that our nation and city continue to face, but with clearly far more attention in recent weeks, combined with the ongoing challenges of a pandemic. So we have continued to be driven by our Blueprint for Success, but as you see here, we are also very committed to community feedback. We've had surveys online and in person filled out by over 400 individuals already, and we continue to hold district-wide community meetings, including a focus in at least one of those meetings on students during the past 3 months when official physical buildings were closed. Next slide. So what you will see here are some of the district survey results that list out some of the fiscal year 21 priorities. You can see here the reflection of a lot of the work that the City Council and Baltimore City together has prioritized around really giving our young people the school buildings that they need remains an incredible priority. You'll see early literacy, phase 2 of 21st century schooling, Kerwin equity, in terms of standing up our current equity office and beginning that work, which clearly has become even, the need for that has become more pronounced over the last few weeks. Another piece I would point out from our community feedback that really does match directionally what we've heard both here from the City Council as well as parents over the last 4 years. It was a renewed focus on career and technology education for our students. Next slide. So what you will see here, again, is some of where we have been doubling down as reflected in our budget. Every year we discuss the ways in which a budget signals the priorities of a community, an organization, and frankly, even down to the family and individual level. You will see that our funding priorities align with some of the work that's listed here within the 3 areas of the blueprint. We heard yesterday from large numbers of city school students who were expressing the need for more culturally responsive ELA curriculum that also will prepare them for life after high school. And so we are looking to do a pilot this year to get feedback from our high school teachers for full implementation in the 21-22 school year, as well as a continued focus on our early literacy efforts where we continue to see some early gains in the implementation of that curriculum. And then you'll see with the leadership, I talked about early career educators earlier, but also really focus on building up our human capital investment with regards to our equity goals. It's one thing to say that we want a more diverse workforce, a workforce more representative of people of color within our city. So we have done a good amount of work that you'll see reflected in the budget to be able to continue to invest in developing the pipeline of future leaders from Baltimore City, as well as future leaders of color from other underrepresented communities within our funding priorities this year. Next slide, Marianne. Thank you. As we move forward, we are continuing the commitment that we talked about probably 2 to 3 years ago to City Council here in these chambers with far more people at that time than we have now. But what you will see is that for fiscal year 21, school teams are beginning the equity work. We have equity leads that are designated in a variety of schools, and we already have had significant numbers, and this will enable us, along with private philanthropic dollars. I want to give a shout out to our philanthropic partners who have continued to devote our resources to support our own. But as we have seen in recent weeks, and we've even noticed that our school communities that in a number of ways have been best equipped to deal with the challenges are best positioned are the ones that frankly have been taking part in a lot of this early intensive training, and we will ramp that up this year. The office that we committed to expand, and we are expanding, will also provide needs-based coaching and consultation. You'll see with regards to enrollment choice and transfer, we're doing making a significant investment in making sure that we can improve the enrollment system, the administrative and safety transfer processes that we have heard overwhelmingly from our school communities, as well as parents and families, needs an overhaul. And under the leadership of Chief High Cupboard, that you can see here, we are again making that a funding priority. And then again, for our family and community engagement work, We've done a good amount of foundational planning this year. And within FY21, what you'll see is the adoption of the dual capacity building framework for school family partnerships as a way to really build that out in more meaningful ways as families have really sought more meaningful engagement with their school communities. Next slide. The other piece that you will see reflected in this budget is our commitment to really invest in career readiness under our academic office, led by our career college and career office, led by Dr. Rachel Pfeiffer. What you will see here is that a lot of the deep work that we did in analyzing, quite frankly, where a number of our holes were in being able to match young people with real career access, real career exposure earlier in school. We took that analysis very seriously. We have been looking at the equity gap analysis that revealed in very concrete ways, and you will see investment in the work that we are doing to make sure our young people are prepared with the skills to enter high-wage, high-skill jobs. You'll see this year implementation of this new roadmap. We have looked across the city. We're identifying locations, staffing to really expand the programming that many in the community have been calling for quite a long time. And we are committed to making sure that more neighborhoods, not just our career technology centers, provide students with that access. You also see with our safe and secure and healthy schools that we are continuing to prioritize schools for security and HVAC improvements, even with the relatively small capital dollars that city schools is allotted every year. We are still committed and remain committed to use the amount that we do have well. And so we have done assessments under the leadership of Dr. Lynette Washington, our Chief Operating Officer, and that team, as well as some of the work that we have been doing on a state level and clearly our 21st century schools. But what you'll see here in this budget reflected is an ongoing commitment to provide both secure buildings as well as climate learning climates that are conducive to learning. And so we will continue with our HVAC improvements, and you will see dollars within this budget dedicated there, as well as new training for our HVAC staff. Dr. Washington and her team have done a heavy lift around building automation system. We are so much further along than we were 2 years ago, and we remain committed to continuing that work and the trajectory of that work within city schools. Next slide. And then with regard to staff recruitment, again, as I was out yesterday, excuse me, hearing from our young people and the concerns they had about making sure that we had an increased number of Black and Brown faculty and educators. We are proud of the work that we have partnered with the BTU and a number of our Black educators across the district, and are seeing what was a decline in the percentage of Black teachers in the district actually not only begin to stabilize, but to turn upward. And that is because of a very focus from our human capital team on continuing to prioritize recruiting high quality candidates. And we have, as you see here, invested in the work of building internal capacity, not just relying on outside forces. We have a new director of recruitment and selection who has done a wonderful job in piloting hiring bonus program for veteran teachers and being far more proactive as a district in our early recruitment. We are much further along this year. I just received a report from the human capital team, and we are now, with regards to our new teacher recruitment, At the beginning of June, we were where we were last year, in the middle, frankly, in the middle to end of July. So that shows a marked improvement because of the investment in that team. And then we continue to maintain partnerships with our alternative teacher programs, like the Urban Teacher Residency and others, as well as partnering more with local colleges to help those career changers make a transition, many of whom, frankly, have professions, backgrounds, connection to Baltimore that makes them very highly sought after candidates to teach in and to serve in our schools. Next slide. And then again, with regards to our curriculum work, we knew, as I said to before the City Council probably a year and a half ago, we knew that there was not going to be a prepackaged curriculum that was going to get us totally where we needed to be in making sure that our young people saw themselves reflected in the curriculum we had. We know that our foundational curriculum ups the ante, and that frankly, I think has borne out in terms of the progress, that we knew we needed a foundational curriculum that was going to keep the standards high and to make sure that our young people were engaged in learning more than just kind of the skills of reading and math, but actually being able to delve back into history and science. That being said, and again, I was reminded yesterday as I listened to our young people's experience as they stood on the steps of North Avenue, that when young people, particularly Black students, Brown students, do not see themselves in the curriculum, there is an element of their learning that is lacking. And so we are very proud of the work that we have done around the building out of our Be More Me curriculum. And this is a social studies curriculum with experiences that really do break down the walls and separating classroom and community. The design is to connect our young people with the rich history of the city, and frankly, to be able to see themselves. So we are highlighting the history and contributions of Black Baltimoreans, also of Baltimoreans from our immigrant community. And this is part of our commitment. I think one of the things that you will see in this budget, but also I think was just amplified yesterday as I heard from our young people as they were expressing what they want to see in their education, is that we actually need to accelerate this work. So while we have been able to, through philanthropic dollars from the Gates Foundation that has been supporting this effort, what you will see is that we centrally, or I should say within the city schools budget, are committed to this as well. And we're going to need to accelerate that work so that young people in every school. What we do know is that students in schools that had the Be More Me curriculum, and it was interesting to me to stand on the steps yesterday and see just how many young people still had not experienced that, because we know from the young people and the teachers who have taught that and experienced it, that they have absolutely said it was the kind of learning they want to do more. So we're going to need to expand that. We piloted a 7th grade Be More Me club that connected mentors from around the district to partner with students to explore themes around identity and community. So they were able to, I just want to say a thank you even to council members that I know are on this call who helped serve as mentors with the Be More Me Club. So Councilman Cohen, Councilwoman Shannon Sneed, Councilman Bill Henry, Councilman Chris Burnett, and it was facilitated by the Mayor's Office of Family and Children, headed by Tisha Edwards. And just want to really thank all of you all for being part of that. Young people got to hear from local, what I call our local greats. So people like Dee Watkins and Devin Allen and others who are from Baltimore, who resonate with our young people, who are committed to this city. And we are committed particularly as I stood and listened from young people yesterday to actually continuing to move in that direction and accelerate that work. And the need based on what I was hearing yesterday is great. And so we need to accelerate with that. I think, Marianne, is that the last slide for me, or is there another? Oh, so this is my last one. I just want to remind the City Council, as well as those watching, this is a very similar pie chart to the one that we introduced last year, because one of the questions that I think the City Council and the community rightly ask every year is how much of the funds actually get to the classroom, and what does that look like? And so what you'll see here is that there's a breakdown that shows that 83% of the funds for city schools are budgeted centrally for school support. And you'll see how much of that breaks down into principal controlled budgets, how much of that goes to central office, how much is in school support budget centrally. As a reminder of what that 15% you see reflected here corresponds to, things like paying for young people to take the SAT, things like, excuse me, the funds that we send to schools to support literacy coaches, to help teachers grow and develop. And then what you will continue to see is that there frankly is very little shift from last year to this year. So while I know it is tempting to blame a lack of all the funds we want to have on a bloated central office, we continue to be one of the LEAs in the state of Maryland with the lowest percentage of our budget going to non-instructional central functions. And with that, Chairman Costello, I will turn it over to our Deputy Chief Financial Officer, Ms. Marianne Cox, to get into more details about this year's budget.
Hear me? Can you hear me now?
We can.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I was having a little bit of difficulty unmuting. Thank you. Okay, in terms of our revenue, as Dr. Santoli had indicated, this budget was developed based on the pre-COVID information that we had. And of course, for our funding, both state and local, is based on enrollment. That is MSDE funded enrollment, which is the enrollment that is taken in this year for the FY21 budget. It was the enrollment taken in September 2019. And then there's various adjustments that are made, you know, for ineligibles or children who might not have their inoculations yet. But you can see from this screen that our enrollment is coming in at pretty level. In September of 2018, the enrollment was 73,580, and in September of 2019, the enrollment was 73,533. So you can see just by looking at the trend that is leveling off of the decrease that we had been seeing for a number of years. So in total, the city schools budget is comprised of these three main funds. We have the general funds at $1.172 billion, the special revenue fund, which is all our grants, both federal, state, and other, of $161.7 million, and the enterprise fund of $54.5 million. That's the food service operation, for a combined total budget, operating budget, of $1.388 billion. For the general fund, you can see here we have a comparison year to year of our FY20 to our FY21 funding. And as you look at the numbers, you can see there's pluses and minuses, but the largest increase from FY20 to FY21 was $8.4 million for the teacher salary incentive grant, which was not included in the FY20 budget because it had not been awarded. So that this was an additional grant for Senate Bill 1030 that MSD awarded to city schools, and we received notification of it in July of 2019. So that would be the main difference going year to year. But you can also see that there are increases plus and minus in all the lines. We have an increase in revenue from the city of Baltimore of approximately $9 million. That has to do with the MOE escalator. It's just the way the calculation goes and the way we had received funding and local contributions in prior years. Our federal revenue remained level. Our federal revenue comes from two main sources and some additional ones. We have our E-rate revenue here. We also have the U.S. Treasury subsidy for our ARA bonds here. And we also have impact aid and some ROTC revenue. For other revenue here, it increased by $750,000, which was related to an increase for investment income. The fund balance contribution decreased from FY20 to FY21. This is the money that is set aside in assigned fund balance that is used the following year to help, balance the budget. So we went from $22 million in FY20 to $15.3 million in FY21. So that is you can see the difference then from $1.162 billion to $1.172 billion. This is the FY20 versus FY21 state revenue comparison. Again, this is just general fund. You can see by the time we get down to the bottom, the state revenue projected difference is, approximately $7 million, but there's a lot of pluses and minuses. You can see the foundation program increased by $2.5 million, and compensatory education increased by $2.5 million, and the LEP, the limited English proficiency enrollment, increased by $7.9 million because of the increase in the student population for this need. We have the guaranteed tax-based revenue went down. I'm looking for the large ones. We also, the hold harmless adjustment went down by $3.5 million. And the non-public went down by 1.5. So you can see there's pluses and minuses all throughout, but with an overall increase of 7.1 million, primarily related to that teacher salary incentive grant, because that was not included in the FY20 budget. This is just a slide on the federal grant. This is a special revenue fund, federal revenue only, 115 million for FY21. And you can see there the large grants. Of course, Title I is the largest grant that we get at 56.3 million. IDEA, or for the special education students, is next at $23.7 million. So we receive a lot of their funding. You can see there the Title I school improvement grant and the SIG 4 money at 14.3 million, which is a large increase from the prior year. And the rest of the revenues go up and down depending on when the grants end. This is a summary slide for the Title I funds. Title I's remain a significant source of revenue to the district and the schools because some of the funding is held at central office for some district-wide programs, and with the bulk of the money going to the schools. So you can see here in FY16, we went from $48.7 million, of which 29.4 was given to 139 schools. And in FY21, we're receiving a Title I grant of $56.3 million, with 31.9 million of that going to 111 schools. These are just some revenue items for our other financing sources. Where it is indicating the other financing sources from fund balance, that would be the amount that is pulled into the budget from assigned fund balance, and it would be held there from the prior year. It would be included in our financial statement. So as we closed our FY18, we had the 22 million in there to set aside for the FY20 budget, and then as we closed as we close the prior year, then we'll include 15.3 million in assigned fund balance for the FY21 budget. The enterprise fund, remember, this is pre-COVID, we had projected a slight a decline in the enterprise fund from 55.3 million to 54.5 million. So some of that was just related to the changes in the amount that we get per meal. So in terms of allocations, we had indicated before that the general fund had $1.172 billion in FY21. We have direct school allocations of $793 million with centrally budgeted allocations of $379 million. For the direct school allocations, you can see the $793 million is made up of all of these sources. We have the fair student funding for traditional schools of $347 million. And you can see there we have base funding of $317 million with weighted funding of $35 million, minus the $5 million that we hold off for the reserve. The reserve is there to take care of things that are unanticipated as we begin the budget, and also to hold money for the enrollment adjustment that happens in November based on the September 30th enrollment count. The charter school amount is $133 million. With a base funding per student of $9,112 for the anticipated 14,651 students in charter schools. We also have locked funding of $217 million. This is generally provided in the form of positions. So we have general ed positions of $10.4 million and students with disabilities of $113 million approximately. The general ed positions there are generally ESOL, ROTC, P-TECH, the principals and the pre-K positions. Now for unlocked students with disabilities, that's $77 million. That is the money that is provided to the schools based on their student populations that the principals may elect, how best to serve the needs of the students. The AOP funding of $15.7 million, that's for the alternative options program that we offer to meet student needs. And we have a targeted amount of $2.9 million for like the IB programs and similar programs. This slide gives the base per pupil change from FY19 through FY21. You can see there that for the traditional schools, say the FY19 adopted per pupil was 5,521, and after the enrollment adjustment, it went to 5,543. Then for the FY20, it was 5,590, and you can see it dropped a little bit for the FY20 final, and it has been held steady for the FY21 proposed. Whereas for the charter schools, it was $9,017 for FY19 adopted. It went down slightly to $9,002 for the final after the enrollment adjustment. And you can see the FY20 adopted for the enrollment adjustment, then it went up to $9,199. And for the calculated per pupil for FY21 was $9,112 for each student in a charter school. This slide provides the information for the charter per pupil population. You can see we start with the general fund revenue. We deduct amounts prior to the calculation of the overhead charges. So that's the retiree health benefits, which is a pass-through. We take out debt service, the revenue contribution from fund balance, and revenue from non-federal, state, and local sources. And then from that subtotal, we calculate the 2% administrative fee. And then from that subtotal, we subtract the district-wide exclusions, such as pre-K and students in non-public placements. Then the needs-based exclusions are deducted, which is the students with disabilities, ESOL services, and specialized transportation. So with that, that results in the funds available for the charter per pupil funding, and we divide that amount by the projected enrollment, as you can see, excluding students in pre-K and private placement, and that is 75,184 enrollment for the charter per pupil allocation for FY21 of $9,112. This slide is presented just to give you some idea of where the district office allocations. You can see there the operations office, and of course that includes transportation and maintenance, the 21st century office, the academics office. That includes the non-public, the chief financial officer, the indirect cost is included in there, and that's why sometimes the numbers appear to go up and down. It's my understanding that our indirect costs that we calculated for FY21 increased from FY20, so that's responsible for that decrease. We have the Achievement and Accountability Office. So you can see where all of these go. We just wanted to show you for comparison. Now, for where it says fringe contingency and utilities, that's where we have prescriptions, drugs, those kind of things. Utilities, I believe, was staying low. The contingency, I think, decreased slightly. So you could see the decrease from 104 million down to 100 million. And of course, debt service is remaining essentially flat. This slide is presented just for information. We get questions from time to time as to how our central office FTEs are funded. And you can see there it breaks it out by the various offices and how many are funded by general fund funding as opposed to the special revenue fund, which is grant funding. So this is a slide just to indicate some information of positions related to some of the areas that had been cited earlier, such as the blueprint. You can see there that there are the FTEs that are indicated there, the specialists for restorative practices or the literacy for the blueprint. There's 40 literacy coaches, so we just wanted to indicate how we are funding our priorities, and certainly positions are roughly three quarters of our total costs. So we show our support for these priorities certainly by providing positions as well as other costs. So you can see the concentration of poverty. We have there's staff specialists and other positions in the chief academic office, and you can see the FTEs funded in the other offices. So that is just to indicate to you how we help to fund our priorities. So that is the last slide. So we are ready to take questions if you have any.
Definitely have questions. Thank you.
All right.
Council President Scott. Vice Chair Leon Pinkett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to commend Dr. Santoli and her entire team for the continued consistent care and concern that they provide to all of our young people and families. And so thank you for the work that you do. You all are on the front line, and if you all don't get it right, our city doesn't get it right. I just want to, if you could just talk a little bit more detail about the city or the school system's efforts around mental health and what we're doing to make certain that resource is available in all of our schools and not dependent upon the principal having to make tough decisions in each school.
No, it's an excellent question, Councilman Pinkett, and one that is just accentuated given what has occurred over the last 3 months. So I appreciate you asking the question. So we continue to maintain a commitment centrally to making sure that each school, the social worker investment that you might remember we made for the first time last year centrally, we are maintaining that. We are also seeing that large numbers of our schools with concentrations of poverty dollars from the state allotment, down payment, for lack of a better term, on Kerwin that came forth. Large numbers of schools used their allotment with that money to have frankly, even add to what was our central investment for their particular schools. I think the other piece is the work that we're doing with our related service providers to be able to provide more culturally responsive. And I think we've been part of the city's efforts. I know that the city council, Councilman Cohen and others have been focused on trauma-informed care. And one of the pieces that we have been committed to is also making sure that the folks who are on the front lines now as psychologists and social workers and medical professionals actually have more of that knowledge base, because it's one thing to add the positions. It's also, we also need to make sure people have the training and the development. I will say that one of the things that we also took into account when we were identifying curriculum was we wanted a true kind of social and emotional component that was consistent in the curriculum. So it wasn't just that outside professionals were providing it, but also that teachers had more supports. And I will just say, even during this crisis, one of the things I hear from families and young people is just the beginning of the circles during their online classes or exchanges with teachers have been some of the most beneficial parts of any kind of connection they've been able to do virtually. I think the question that we're going to be faced with moving forward, particularly as we think about kind of the medical supports we're going to have in place to have a safe reopening of school, even if it's a hybrid model, is quite frankly the balance between the mental health supports and the need to have more actual medical supports in schools to help do things like temperature checks and make sure that we're following that. And that sir, I will just say forthrightly, I don't think we have that fully figured out in terms of what the balance between that. We continue to partner with Health Human Services. The other piece I would say here is that it's a testament to the city of Baltimore as well, that this city, unlike a number of cities I've worked in, actually has a rich kind of a rich complement of grassroots and community-based organizations that actually, frankly, partner with us to help supplement a lot of our wellness work. And so we continue to lean on those partners and, again, maintain those investments. I don't think what you will see this year, we didn't have the equivalent this year of what we had last year in terms of, committing that every school would have a social worker. But we have, for example, increased the numbers of schools that have guidance counselors. And that was done in large part by some of our central guidance, but also, frankly, the leadership of our school principals who realized that this actually was of value. And I think the work that under Mavis Jackson in the College and Career Office to really revamp and support our guidance counselors in different ways with different skills has brought more value to the position. So it's the existence of the position, but it's also the commitment of resources to develop the people in those positions. But no, you rightly add that, and it's a question. You rightly ask that, and it's a question, particularly over the last few weeks, as we think through reentry and how young people are going to be reentering our schools. That continues to be front and center. When we were developing this budget, we didn't know that was going to happen, but we know we're going to have to probably shift some resources. That's part of those budget adjustments we're going to have to make as young people start coming back into schools and seeing that.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, my second question is, clearly this pandemic in many regards has not necessarily exposed, but definitely highlighted a lot of deficiencies in all of our systems. And as I look at Councilman Cohen, the digital divide is definitely one of those areas. And so being that we don't really know what school is going to look like come the fall, and but we know that education is going to be different no matter what, whether kids are in the classroom or not. And so some of it's technology, but other part of it is actual curriculum and training and making certain that people understand. So can you speak to that? But can you also speak to the fact that I think that the city overall is not taking advantage of an opportunity to utilize school buildings and libraries and publicly owned spaces to really create a network around the city to really help, make certain that, Wi-Fi and broadband, gets to communities that typically aren't touched. So can you talk about, where we're going as it relates to, the virtual classrooms and technology, but also, the collaborative effort that I think is going to be necessary for us really to address this digital divide.
No, and I would just say, Councilman Pinkett, you're spot on the need to partner. We have had over the last few months a both and approach, right? So we have done, and I know that Sarah Heaton is on the line, and I'll invite her also to add some of that work that we've been doing. But between the work that we've been doing to get as many devices to young people as possible early on, we have not stopped that. And so we know my charge is, by the time we start school, we're, by whatever means we've got to do it, we've got to make sure that our young people all have devices, because we're still not in a place where we are yet one-to-one. And by the way, I can't thank again, the leadership of the city council president, as well as Councilman Cohen and all of you, quite frankly, that $3 million that you allocated to supporting technology access for young people was well placed and really helped in that. To the point that you're getting at, that we're even seeing and that we're hearing from teachers, having a device, even having internet access does not mean students are comfortable, teachers are comfortable, and frankly, families are comfortable, right? Like we've got to make sure all three. And so it's part of the reason why we are placing a heavy emphasis on making sure we have opportunities for teachers this summer and moving forward to have more opportunities to actually get better at some of what goes into teaching. I mean, I chuckle with colleagues and say prior to, March 15th, I think, which was our last day of school, there were only a handful of educators, period, and families who knew what the difference between asynchronous and synchronous learning, right? And now when I talk to families, they may not know the term, but they know the difference between someone posting an assignment on the web, on their platform, or a teacher pre-recording a video versus a teacher being actually online be able to see all of his or her students and interact with the students. So we just have been accelerated into that. And so a lot of what we're committed to and what the team is working on is how do we make sure that we're really equipping all teachers. We had some teachers who just, because of their knowledge base, were brilliant. I talk about Ms. Fort all the time, who teaches 5th grade, who I got to visit her math classroom. And, for all the people who think that our children are too traumatized to be able to learn, let me tell you, Ms. Fort, you go in her classroom and it's clear kids were coming from all different kinds of challenges and home situation, and she was working it when I went in. But, in fairness to other teachers, if you don't have that knowledge of how to actually, set kids in small groups online, virtually, we had to do work on improving platforms, right? We got feedback from teachers that said, actually, the current platform you have, it's very difficult to see all of my students in class at one time. So we did some negotiation with Zoom. Our legal team, our tech team did a fabulous job in renegotiating some of the security concerns that Zoom was experiencing nationally. Our team did that work. So we're benefiting from a lot of the things we were thrown into doing early, but we want to build on that. And then I would also, just leave, if you want a little more detail, Chief High Cupboard and Sarah Heaton did a great job patching together, to your point, some of the community leveraging with different companies. We got Comcast to go from 1 month to 3 months, but, after 3 or 4 months, young people are still going to need, right? And families are still going to need access. We got one laptop to a home, but, you know, I teared when I saw one family that was so grateful to get their laptop for their first grader. But they have a second grader, right? And so you've got two, you know, this image of two girls sharing a laptop and a Chromebook, and they're thrilled to have it. But I'm sitting there thinking, like, really? You know, now they're going to pass on and off. So how are we, you know, how are we making sure we're looking at family need, not just as individual students? So
All right, we're going to take a 5-minute recess. Having some technical issues. Dr. Santoli's laptop may not have been plugged in, so it restarted. So, you know what, we're going to make it a 10-minute break. We'll come back at 6:40. Right now it's 6:34 p.m. We'll be back at 6:45 p.m. Thank you for your patience. And Councilman Pinkett, I think she was finishing up your question. We'll get right back to you, sir. Thank you. Okay, Budget and Appropriations Committee, we're back in session. Dr. Santoli's, I think you were answering Councilman Pinkett's question. You have the floor.
thank you, sure. Thank you. Sorry about that, Councilman Pinkett. Oh,
no problem. I think it was right on cue since we were talking about, you know, technology and the digital divide. I didn't know that you were experiencing one in City Hall.
Fair enough.
So you can imagine what they're feeling like in communities throughout the city.
Well, come on. I hear that.
But
I will.
I think that.
Please, go ahead.
I think that you can finish up, but I think that you pretty much touched the issue.
Okay, but and the last thing that I would add is just know that we are working and pushing on the internet questions, the access. We are looking to be able to purchase actual hotspots for families that we know we're just not going to be there. But I cannot say enough the need to just continue the advocacy from this body, from the grassroots organizations, the community organizations that have been lobbying, the young people that have been lobbying. I said to the House Appropriations Committee today that it continues to be a real issue. And, you know, because we do what we need to do for kids, we're going to continue to patch together. But there has to be a community wide, a citywide solution to that, because it's just taking up too much time trying to patch things together. Yes, I'm excited about the possibility, and I want to emphasize possibility of mesh networks, but we still don't know yet whether that works, right? And so using buildings and all of that. So that would just be the last thing I would say would be a request for the city council not to let up and not to relent on having citywide solutions, to your point, that make sure every zip code is touched.
Thank you, Dr. Santoli's, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Pinkett.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Madam CEO and everybody. I'm just going to apologize. There is a gospel concert happening, a gospel protest with music happening outside of City Hall right now, so that might be the background noise that you're hearing. Madam CEO, just want to say first and foremost, thank you guys for your great work, especially during these very trying circumstances. We know that this is a school year like no other. I've been one of the worst parts about COVID for me is that I don't get to hang out at schools at hours of the day. But I did make many appearances on Zoom, including one today, actually, for a second grade class at Violetville Elementary. But I wanted to just talk about the cut really quickly to the risk management and what that would mean for you as far as the service impact from other areas that would have for you?
Yes. So I'll also ask both Marianne and the chief of staff to chime in here. You know, look, I am balancing right now between, frankly, being thankful that we haven't taken deeper cuts in this. You know, I have colleagues in other cities who are now sitting in hearings just like this one, explaining 20% cuts to their budgets, like for this coming school year, and it's because of the leadership of you. Of the mayor and others that has not occurred. In terms of the impact, we're still looking at the impact, right? And it means that there are things we were going to do this year that we might not be able to do. It means that there are increases in areas that and a good example is, we were supposed to put even more in our equity office this year. Fortunately, Dr. Durant is amazing. And so she is working it as best she can. But, she was supposed to get additional staff this year. And so we had to, put a hold on some of that. There are things that we could have done always with that money. And, there are other areas that I would say, when we had the mental health discussion earlier, that we will have to find someplace else. Things we'll have to put on hold. But I'm just being forthright because I can be that way with you, sir, and just say, I'm talking to colleagues in Texas who are like having to cut millions upon millions of dollars. And so, sure. Do I want the 11? Of course, but I'm also taking into account the other needs that the city might have right now. And frankly, the larger fish to fry is what is going to occur for fiscal year 21. I would rather focus on that. We'll have to cut and paste and things we won't do and we'll put off. But I don't know if Chief of Staff or Marianne, do you have any kind of immediate specific responses to the council president's question?
Sure. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yeah, great. So yeah, I was just going to add, I think that's right. I think the only thing I would add is that we're just trying to, we're working really hard to think through what is the long-term path for sustainability. So this is not a short-term situation for us. There is the FY20 already. We've had impacts in terms of the impacts on our enterprise fund and the lost revenue from loss of meals served. And then, in FY21, we have that impact. And then we're looking at the FY22, uncertainty about the Kerwin. And so I think our focus is really trying to think, how do we meet the needs of students now while ensuring that we provide stability for our schools and our students, and make sure that we are using resources wisely, so that to the extent that we can also reserve any resources for the upcoming unknowns, like the need to accelerate students once we get past this. We are going to really want to make sure we have resources available at the end of all this to accelerate student learning for our students who, through no fault of their own, have had their education disrupted. So yes, it causes a disruption that's not ideal, and so we are looking at that loss as well as other losses, just to figure out what do we reprioritize, and how do we make smart decisions that meet student needs now as much as we can, and then also allow us stability and planning for the future.
Yes, and just as a final comment, certainly we need to identify where that type of money might come from. We have a few logical places that we could start. Every year in our budget, we put a contingency reserve in there, and that could possibly take some of it. Of course, the contingency reserve is there for unexpected things that happen during the year, as they do. So it is... we will be very careful about where we might take it from in terms of trying to locate other places. We'll look again at our the vacancy factor that we put in to see if there might be some flexibility there. But other than that, it's just reallocation. That's our choice.
Thank you. Thank you. all three of you. I want to talk, Dr. Santoli, you were talking about earlier, before our technical difficulties, talking about specifically about recruitment of teachers, especially for teachers that look like our students, Black teachers. Can you go a little bit deeper into that, like what the current retention rate for our Black teachers are, and
Yeah.
if we are doing some stuff like maybe trying to offer, I don't know if it would be through Ms. Durant's section of the school system or others, like specific efforts to like help Black teachers and even specific teachers for people who grew up here or live here in Baltimore City obtain accreditation and certifications and those kind of things?
Yeah, that's a great question, Council President, and I'm going to actually invite Chief Grant Skinner, who heads up Human Capital, to give you a little bit more detail specifically with that, because we have done great work and we are seeing higher retention rates of our Black teachers over the last year or two. So Chief Grant Skinner, I'll turn it over to you.
Good evening. I think to start with a little bit of context and talk about the retention rate that you asked about, we have seen recent progress here and are investing through the FY21 budget in ways that we believe will continue and expand on some of that progress. The district unfortunately had a period over 11 years before 2016 when the percentage of our new teachers hired during that period was who were Black was only 1/3. So 1 out of every 3 teachers who were hired for this long period in the district were Black. And then in each of the last 4 years, that percentage has been between 48 and 51%. So a significant change in the district that we are also looking to increase even more. Dr. Santoli referred earlier to work in partnership with the BTU and other city schools staff members and advocates and community members that took place over the course of a year to inform ways that we can recruit and retain even more Black teachers. I will also say in a district with certainly a rapidly expanding population of English learners, and particularly Spanish-speaking English learners. This is the second year in a row that we've had more Latinx teachers than ever before, and that's another area where we want to continue to expand that. A couple of specific things in our budget. Dr. Santoli has talked about the addition of a director position. So we have been able to, in the last few years, expand our internal recruitment capacity, and at a time when the market for teachers is as competitive as ever in a state that does not prepare enough new teachers for our districts. You know, there are basic things actually, like our ability to purposely cultivate applicants and process improvements, like Dr. Santoli talked about earlier, that informs and actually helps us make sure we're competitive for everyone, but certainly also Black teachers who are also in demand by surrounding districts that have even much larger gaps between the demographics of their students and their teachers. We are growing our partnership with Urban Teachers, which is the only state-approved teacher preparation program that has a full-year teacher residency model, where resident teachers spend an entire year in a classroom alongside an excellent teacher before they become a full-time city schools teacher. And that's a program that has both recruited and retained higher percentages of Black teachers than our other both traditional and alternative teacher preparation programs. President Scott, you mentioned Dr. Durant and the Equity Office, and we are currently prepared for later this month, providing professional development to all of our school-based hiring managers about equitable hiring practices to ensure that we can again build on this progress. And the final thing I'll say is we have looked at the data, and we know that given that traditional colleges and universities in Maryland are preparing a teacher workforce that is about 85% white, that we have to use these alternative ways to recruit teachers, and that includes conditionally certified teachers. We have a significant number of teachers each year who we hire who didn't originally prepare and seek to become a teacher, and this includes large numbers of Black teachers. And through that working group that I talked about and some of our investments in the year ahead, we're really focused also on ensuring that all of those teachers can transition within a couple of years to having a standard certificate so they can actually remain long-time city schools teachers.
Thank you to that. Well, you guys, I think you all know that I think the world of Dr. Durant. She actually helped me get into college, so I think the world of her. But I just want to follow up on that point for you guys. Is there things that you guys could use from us? Like, for example, you know that we do specific tax credits and things for some of our like DPW law workers, for police, obviously. What kind of things would you guys need from our side to another a carrot to try to attract teachers, especially those who look like our young people, and then also just also noting that too. I don't know if I brought this up to you guys before, but I think that also we could also build a better partnership with like Morgan and Coppin and even UMES, because we know a lot about Baltimore. Students go there, and when they graduate, many of them want to stay home, and we should build those relationships.
Thank you for that. One of the things that I didn't talk about is we also have been more intentional this year and looking ahead to next year and how we're staffed within the Human Capital Office to ensure that we can leverage existing partnerships we have with Morgan and Coppin and other local universities and colleges to ensure that the candidates who are coming out of their teacher preparation programs, who often are completing internships in our schools, are having a positive experience both in their internship and through the application process to ensure that we convert more of them to full-time city schools employees. I really appreciate the question about how the city can partner in other ways. And excuse me, I'm sorry. Would say that last year we partnered with a local nonprofit to ensure that our teachers knew about and could access a program that provided some incentives for people who are purchasing a home within the city. And certainly knowing that both for recruitment purposes and for retention purposes, it would be great to have show people that there's an opportunity to both work and live in Baltimore. That's certainly an area that would be interesting to explore, how we could ensure that incentives are in place for teachers who want to live in the city where they work.
Thank you. We can have a further discussion about that later. So my last question, Mr. Chair, is Madam CEO, can you?
Mr. President, you're on question 4, but you are the president, so go ahead.
I haven't asked any questions all day today, Mr. Chair.
I know I'm always counting, sir. Always counting.
And my questions have not been of the. If Councilman Henry's on here, they have not been of the Councilman Henry variety. They've been one questions.
That is a very fair point, which I'll have to accept.
Hey.
There he is. My last question is just simply, I don't know if I missed it, and if I did, I'm sorry. If I did, don't do it. Don't reiterate it. I'll get my colleagues to do it. But just if there's an update on the state of the air condition, I know you guys are getting a big chunk of capital money from the city. Just to state on where we are on that process.
Yes, and one of the things that I did mention, I only mentioned earlier that we are staying on track. We are continuing to move forward with that. If you want more specifics, I do know that our Chief Operating Officer, Dr. Washington's here Dr. Washington, if you want to just kind of briefly let the council president know where we are. I know that we're in process, but Dr. Washington can speak specifically to where we are in that trajectory.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Okay, sorry. So good evening. So in terms of where we are with the air conditioning update, is that we're moving forward. We have not been impacted significantly with COVID-19 in terms of our construction. We had 5 construction projects. They're still moving forward. We had about 10 projects that were under design. All of that work is still moving forward. So in terms of the plan, we're not off the plan. We're still moving forward in that area.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dr. Santoli, is there a online, do you have a webpage that outlines where we're at in terms of the 21st century schools construction, and then what's coming next in terms of renovations? One of the reasons I ask, Allison and I, I've been having this conversation for the past couple of years.
Yeah.
Top priority for me in my district is Utah Marshburn Elementary School. So I'm, really focused on trying to figure out how to move the needle on that. So one, if you could, if there's somewhere online where all this information is, if you could have Allison or someone just email that over to me now, if that's possible, because I'd like to peruse that. And
sure.
If you could give me an update on where things are at for Utah Marshburn.
Sure. So what I would, what I will do is ask Chief Perkins Cohen to, actually, I think Melissa's going to look it up now and see whether we have it and can get it for you. And then Chief Perkins Cohen, because we don't have our head of 21st century with us here, so I'm going to ask her to, to speak specifically to Utah, where we are with Utah Marshburn.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. So where we are in the project in general is that we are continuing making progress on the schools that we had in line. We will finish the 28 schools that we had identified in this phase of 21st century. Mary Rodman is the next one that opens in the fall, as well as we have 2 schools that are not being built through 21st century that are being built by our operations team, Graceland and Hollywood, that are opening in the fall. After this phase, then we are doing, we're focusing on high schools. So we, HB1, passed in the legislature in the General Assembly this year. And that would provide additional resources to continue the 21st century initiative. And we really decided with that investment to try to focus on our high schools. Our high schools, a number of them have been renovated, and high schools, because we're a choice district, they're schools that impact all students, and so we decided that with those resources, which are hugely helpful but aren't going to cover a huge number of schools, that we would prioritize high schools as if we could get through our high schools, then that is at least one part in a student's life where every student would have access to a 21st century building, which frankly they should all have access to. So all that to say that Utah Marshburn is not in that list, but we continue to, we continue to look at our portfolio, and frankly, I can tell you for sure that we are not giving up. We do not think this is the end of the line in terms of this next round of funding. I should say as a note that with the Kerwin veto, the legislation was written so that when the Kerwin bill was vetoed, HB1, the construction bill, also does not go into effect. We are very optimistic that the veto will be overridden, and so are counting on that moving forward. But I just wanted to make a note to the public that there is some uncertainty around that. But we are very committed to this project, and that there needs to be additional resources for it. The inequities in the facilities across the state are glaring, and our students deserve more than the buildings they have at Utah Marshburn and at all of our schools. And so we are committed to continuing to work with the state legislature and other partners to make sure that we get through every single building and that all of our students are attending a 21st century building.
Thank you. Councilwoman McCray.
One thing I mention anytime I speak to say, Melissa, or I speak to Allison, is that I only have elementary and middle schools within my district. I don't have any high schools. So early childhood education is very important. One thing that you spoke about was making early childhood learning, early literacy, a foundation, a priority within your budget. Can you speak to that just a little bit more about what's coming within a budget and how that's allocated specifically towards early literacy? Thank you.
Sure. No, thank you. By the way, it's interesting to talk to both you and Chair Costello via the screen and in the same room, but I just wanted to add that little bit. So I will start, and then I will ask Chief Davis if he wants to add anything. What I would say with regards to our early literacy work is one of the ways that you will see this in the budget is first, the continued support around actual literacy coaches for teachers for some of our focus schools. And these are expert literacy folks who, when we looked across the district, we realized that because of funding cuts, numerous principals did not have budget resources for that kind of support. And so we will continue to focus some dollars in that direction. I think the other place you'll see it is that we continue to invest in the professional learning for early grades teachers. So we just actually, the Board of Commissioners just passed, just approved additional investment. I don't want to get too technical on you because I'm sure that's not what's helpful. But we've looked at areas of phonemic awareness, which for the sake of the public is really making sure that we have the supports in place for our earliest learners to understand sounds and letter correspondence and what that actually looks like. We have doubled down on providing professional learning for our teachers on science of reading and what that actually looks like within foundations and how we restructure our literacy block around that. And then we made a huge investment now 2 years ago in new ELA curriculum with a heavy focus on, frankly, helping to build young people's knowledge in areas like science and social studies, which actually has unfortunately been stripped away into many elementary schools that serve large numbers of students of color and are located in under-resourced communities. So our focus, that the early literacy has been a primary focus for us. It's some of the data that we track the closest because we know if we're not teaching our students to read, it's part of why it's a focus in our blueprint. All the other learning is not going to move forward. We also, and I think Chief Davis can speak to this, are also investing in greater links between our early learning office and our literacy efforts to make sure that the work we're doing in literacy is also taking into account the needs of early learners, and particularly within the current crisis and, frankly, some of the safety challenges we've had. You know, sometimes our youngest learners are most vulnerable to not be able to have the kind of activity based experiences that actually we know developmentally our littlest people need. And so we continue to invest in our early learning office period. It is about skills around literacy, but it is also about making sure that we are not depriving young people, many of whom, you know, and we know nationally, Black and Brown students are more likely to be in more restrictive settings that are less robust educationally. And so we've also devoted a lot of attention and increasing attention to making sure that there's not this gap between what absolutely should be rigorous curriculum, but then also should be what we know are developmental play-based experiences that really help young minds learn. So that's what I would say on that.
I just had one more question. So you said the literacy coaches within the focus schools.
Mhm.
Is there a timeline, or is it within the blueprint to make sure that we have literacy coaches at least in all of our elementary schools? Is something that constituents who are teachers in schools within my district have spoke about. So what is the timeline for city schools to make sure that we have literacy coaches in all of our elementary schools? And also, do you have a list, if you don't have it readily available, can you furnish it to the committee on the focus schools that have literacy coaches within them?
Yes, and we can certainly do that. We can forward you both the map and the list of, we call them our intensive learning sites. That's what I said, focus schools, but those intensive literacy sites, learning sites, we can definitely forward those to you. And I will just kind of, I will speak frankly, that one of the challenges has been, whenever there's either reductions in funding or not as much funding, it means it slows down the pace at which the expansion. So we had plans to bring on additional intensive literacy sites each year so that we would have a cohort and that we eventually would get to, all elementary schools that wanted one, a literacy coach. There's some schools that have figured that out in their budget already, but that was the intent. But I will say, frankly, that, expanding the literacy sites and taking on that cost of the literacy coach means that it takes a longer period of time. And I've said that in whether it's public dollars or philanthropic dollars, that the pace at which we are able to expand with something that needs to support, the cost of a literacy coach does mean that we have to take that in account. But yes, our focus was in really wanting to provide that resource as broadly across, to your point, all schools that had elementary grades, particularly in early literacy, as possible. But we even have secondary schools. I know you don't have any, but we have high schools that also have literacy coaches because of, frankly, too many high school students that have lower levels of literacy than they should to be able to kind of take advantage, of those learning opportunities.
Thank you.
Thank you. Vice President Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I guess I want to thank you, Dr. Santoli, and your team for just the hard work that you continue to do with just working with the 21st century schools and just, all of the problems and things that we have to deal with in the school system. And then I want to also thank, your partnership that you have with our colleague, Councilman Cohen, and bringing out the issue of trauma and how, we have to address that. Also, the issue with the digital divide. And I also want to thank you for understanding the importance of partnerships as we continue to grow our community schools. I'm just elated that you worked and accepted my idea of that partnership with LifeBridge and the first curriculum of middle school. And I just hope that takes off. I know that the pandemic kind of, I'm feeling hurt some of the enrollment, but I think that we're going to get some students from Pimlico that's going to probably accept and go through that program. So I'm really elated that that's something that can start with young people from an interest in health at a lower level and move up. And LifeBridge is basically training their, I see them as training their employees, and that that curriculum growing to the Career in Technology High School at Forest Park. So I appreciate that. And then also, back in September, thank you again for accepting the partnership for that pilot citywide health fair where Pimlico turned into like a health
Yes.
triage over the weekend and basically converted most of that school into a hospital that served, and it, because it was a pilot that weekend, it was over 1,000 people that participated in that citywide. So I'm hoping to, I think it's because of the pandemic, it's going to mess with that happening again somewhere in the city this year, but I want to have talks to maybe get that at another location because, you know, it happened so fast, and I wish some of my colleagues had seen and been a part of that because it was not just the eyeglasses. They came, they actually made glasses, and families came there together. They got physicals, they got mental health. They had some people that wanted help for addiction. I mean, it was just a full circle of health needs. And I think that's something that needs to, well, it shows how our health system is kind of broken in a way too. But it was just total free services with everything. So, and that's something that I know after this pandemic that we're probably going to need more of throughout the city. We did have, we spoke with transportation earlier, and I had brought, that part of the conversation was about some of their partnerships and programs, and specifically the auto mechanic program that they seem to be connected with Mergenthaler and another school offhand, I can't remember, but since Forest Park does have an auto mechanic program as well. So I think if someone communicates with transportation, they can maybe help enhance that because they were reaching out to me. I mean, they were looking for auto parts for the students to, practice, that trade through that program, and really couldn't find any donations. So somehow someone connects with transportation, they might could get parts or something from and help in that program at that particular school for
Okay.
auto mechanics. The alumni is very much interested in that program succeeding there, and again, it's just another outreach. I'm trying to think if there was. Oh, and I had an opportunity through this pandemic when the city was giving out, the schools were trying to get the computers, the laptops to the students. So I participated in the give out at Callaway Elementary. And for those of you that, if you know where Callaway is, it's also connected to Webster Kendrick Boys and Girls Club now. The buildings connected together, and they also helped because of that connection with the school, with the rec center and the schools being together and a private connection. They helped, donate and work again, another partnerships. And I noticed that a lot of the schools that seem to be connected to the rec centers that belong to rec and parks, they really seem to be successful. I know that other council members must have some kind of connection like that. I think the school system really needs to maybe have a detailed conversation with rec and parks to kind of enhance some of those centers with that partnership. I think it's really time for that because in some cases, the rec center just owns the building, but the school owns the property. There really needs to be dialogue with, since we're really trying to engage more youth in outside activities and everything, that connection can grow right there. And I think it's with that partnership, it would help in the cost of things. So I just wanted to throw that out there. And the last thing, if there's of course, in my district, I have Martin Luther King that's closing, and the elementary kids are going to Edgecombe Circle and the middle school kids are going to Pimlico. And there's been conversations with transportation on those walking routes with the elementary kids going to, and of course, they're going through dangerous drug areas. I had the conversation with transportation about that, the vegetation growth along the sidewalks. Whoever is in charge of that, I think that's also something that they need to push to get transportation to start cutting out that vegetation so the kids aren't walking in the streets. And of course the lighting and all that is a part as well. So just wanted to kind of throw that out there. I'm feeling other council members might have some of those concerns with school closures and kids moving to other schools. We want to make sure those walking routes are real. It's just so extremely important. I don't know if you want to comment now on anything that I've talked about.
No. Well, and we're also making sure that we're taking notes, Vice President. So I want you to know that on that last part, we do make it our business to make sure that we walk the route. So I'm glad that you're flagging, and we will make sure that our team actually walks the routes that students will be walking to see where some of those problem areas are up close. We have learned over the years through this 21st century work that, it's one thing to see it on a map, and it's another thing to actually walk the routes that young people are going to be walking. So we will do that. We will flag that. And then some of the other partnership ideas, I think we, through a lot of the 21st century work, we have been working more closely with Rec and Parks. And so that's an opportunity to build on that relationship. And I would add that our community schools are also, where we have particularly strong community school directors and, they've coordinators, and Chief High Cupboard has been doing a great job in her team in spearheading that training. One of the things we are focusing on is exactly what you've been talking about and championing, at least since I've been sitting in this role, and that is the power of partnerships. Because oftentimes, if principals are just gifted in that area and know how to do it, then they do it. But what we're finding is that within community schools, where community school coordinators have that skill set, we're more likely to see that leveraging across agencies and frankly across organizations in the way that I know that you've championed for a long time. So I would just add that as well.
All right. Well, thank you. That's all I have to say.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Chris Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for joining us again, Dr. Santoli, and to all that you're doing over at the school system. Been great partners, you and your staff. I just had two questions, and I'll hold off on my other ones for the next round. The first, on to dovetail off of the Vice President's commentary about transportation and walking to school. There was a study done a few years back that looked at public transit. I know the school system was a part of that research, but looked at the transit, how our kids get to school. And in there, it indicated the biggest finding, I thought, a number of findings, but the one that stood out to me the most was that if all students tried to get to school on time, the system would not be able to accommodate that using the system as in our MTA, our public transit system. And we know that 6 out of 10 students in school, at least at that time, were using public transit. And so that's a huge issue for me. So the question I had was, one, I know that in previous hearings, you have indicated that the school system is looking into this issue and developing a plan of action. So just sort of an update on where we stand with that would be helpful.
Sure. And one of the things, and thank you, Councilman Burnett, for surfacing it. I had a question earlier today, so I'll just also take this opportunity, and I know Chief Lynette Washington will probably have more detail, but one of the things I do want to point out to the City Council is given the health guidelines, the current health guidelines in place in terms of guidance with regarding the reopening of school. The study that you cited and our conversations over the years where I too have been concerned about helping all of our young people get to school. I will say that that is going to be exponentially more challenging this school year, given what we know about the social distancing requirements now. If those change, that's fine, but you know as well as I do the challenges we already had in that area. Those are just going to be exacerbated. And then the other piece I would say before I turn it over to Dr. Washington is we under Dr. Washington's leadership and Jacinta Hughes has done a really great job in really pushing how we can think about this differently. We had prioritized a slow, steady kind of refurbishing of our own fleet, recruiting more of our own drivers, excuse me, to be able to supplement some of our transportation. And, that's one way that we have looked at it. I think, though, fundamentally, in no time soon are we going to have a large enough bus fleet, even with the, kind of steady but small investment we're able to make to fully compensate for, some of the infrastructure struggles. So we continue to partner when it comes to providing data and tracking the data around on-time arrivals, around routes that make sense in terms of MTA hubs and things. I thank this council, you and others, for helping to advocate for bus passes that go longer and those kinds of things over the years, and those do make a difference. Fundamentally, though, the transport, having lived in multiple cities, and I love Baltimore, and this is home for me now, but I will just tell you, we still suffer from a lack of capacity in that area. And it's not to speak disparagingly, but it is to speak realistically, that transportation for our young people just is what it was when that report was first written. But Dr. Washington, do you want to add anything?
No, I would just echo the statements that you're saying about the fact that this year, given what's going on, we are going to have challenges as we are dealing with social distancing. And also within that report, it was focused on high school students. And so we do transport a percentage of high school students that have IEPs. So of course, with our internal fleet and also depending on contractor fleets and with social distancing, we will have challenges, but also the MTA, which is an agency that is experiencing a cut and are not going to be able to add additional routes and some of those different things like that. I think that we're going to continue to have challenges. One of the things that we are doing is looking at, are there alternative ways that we can transport students? And then also making sure that we're monitoring those particular areas where MTA can't address those capacity issues to see if there's other alternative ways we can address it.
Yeah, I think thank you. And once that report or your analysis is done, it would be helpful. I think it's something we can. I don't want to sign Councilman Cohen up for it, but something that we should be looking at in the Education Committee moving forward, especially as the pandemic rages ahead. The second question, still transportation focused, part question, part statement. I've been through two 21st century school processes at Calvin Rodwell, Wildwood, and now Mary Rodman. And one of the reoccurring concerns that I get especially because it typically coincides with a school closure, is the distance that our young children have to walk from the neighborhood that they lived in, which may have been close to a previously open school, to the new, amazing, not complaining about new schools, 21st century school, and the distance that they have to travel. So that's one area that I know you already sort of touched on with your comments to Vice President Middleton. But the other, I guess, point I'd like to make is that in my experience as well is that there's doesn't seem to be enough collaboration between 21st century schools and the Department of Transportation when it comes to not only the way that kids get to school and thinking about being creative in that way, but the other piece is that we all when there's a combining of schools, that means that there's more students being dropped off, and it has a significant traffic impact on the neighborhood. There hasn't been one of these yet where that concern hasn't come up, but it feels like that is a sort of a separate, well, the Department of Transportation is responsible for that, so they'll do something, and I end up having to push them along, the other agency along, to start a process after the school is already built, after we've already heard the concerns, and it just seems to be a recurring theme. And as much as I do want, obviously, more new schools, and will continue to advocate and join you all in that fight, this is something I just wanted to flag, just as while we're here talking about the needs of our young people.
No, and I appreciate you flagging it, Councilman Burnett. We have worked to really balance the needs for families who find themselves further away, particularly when it is overflow space, to be able to accommodate. There's always room for improvement. So I take that feedback seriously when you say that, and we certainly will review it. But I also know that Chief Perkins Cohen, did you want to add to this a bit?
Yeah, I just want to say that
Allison,
can you hear me?
Want to add anything?
Can you hear me? Oh, you can't hear?
I can hear you.
Oh, you can? Okay. I just wanted to say that I agree with you. I think it's an issue that we don't have. We have not been good. We haven't done a good enough job of figuring out how to think through the traffic patterns and think through that when we open school. So it is an area that we recognize that we need to get better at, and make sure that really looking at the traffic patterns around schools and things like parking is something we do when we're creating these new schools. So I know that in, I think it's October, we're working with the city to do kind of a retreat to kind of look back at 21st century and see what we can learn about what we've done and how we can do things better. And I think this is an area where we're aware of that this is a need. Challenges we often have with this is, how to pay for these things, because there are limitations on the funding in terms of what it can be used for. And I think some of the interpretation has limited to the school envelope, but we just have to keep pushing on interpretations like that to try to figure out how to meet this need, because we have had situations where schools have opened and the traffic situation has just been really problematic. So I appreciate you flagging it, and I agree with you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple more, but I'll wait for my next turn.
Thank you, Councilman Zeke Cohen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, Dr. Santoli. It's nice to see you.
Good to see you.
First, want to genuinely appreciate you all for the work that you've been doing post COVID-19. Know that we've been watching carefully the team with Chief Hike Hubbard and Sarah and everyone else, and just the absolutely extraordinary hustle and chutzpah that you all have shown, getting devices to young people, just doing things that, frankly, most districts either haven't been able to do, don't need to do. I think it's a real, it should be a nationally recognized story, just how young people, community, your team, teachers, all these different community organizations have all been working together to make it happen. So I just want to say I appreciate you for that.
Thank you.
On that note, one of the areas of concern that I've heard from students, particularly recently, there were some students from Somos that raised an issue around internet speeds from the Internet Essentials program, right? So unfortunately, at its most basic speed, young people report that they are unable to stay on some of the platforms that teachers require. So Zoom becomes hard, Google Classrooms becomes hard. So while I'm personally grateful to Comcast for providing the free 2 months, I don't think it's good enough right now. If the speed is not commensurate with what our children need to learn, and if our children need to be online, probably for the foreseeable future, depending on what next year looks like, then according to our state constitution, they are guaranteed an adequate education, and it ain't adequate if they can't stay on the platform. And I'm hearing that from a number of students. So some of the young folks from Comcast, a bunch of groups have asked for increasing the speed at the very basic level, increasing the months that it is free, because we know that many of our families, while 2 months is appreciated, it's just not enough.
That's right.
Right? We're going to be in this pandemic for, unfortunately, probably a long time. I anticipate there will be a second wave, and next school year is just going to look really, really different. And so we're going to need that to be extended, and then also opening up the public hotspots. Was wondering if you could speak to that. I know that that's been a priority for you all as well, but just want to publicly, again, commend you on the work and also ask for your support in really pushing Comcast to do right by our children and our families.
No, and thank you, Councilman Cohen, for your advocacy, the council's advocacy around this. It does make a difference. We too have noted that. I mean, in the same way that in the early weeks, we knew that young people writing compositions on their cell phone was not a viable option. So too, to your point, does the base level of internet speed, and having, even in my house, if you count my 3 daughters, and my husband and I all trying to be on in the same home at the same time. I get the yelling over the banister too, right? Like, hello, my teacher just dropped, Mom, what's going on? So believe me, I hear you, and it is real. The team has done, I think, a good job in beginning to anticipate and taking this next phase, what I'm calling, now that school is ending, and we know, to your point, we have to be ready in the fall to have kind of better connectivity. So I would ask Chief Highcupboard and Sarah Heaton, who I know you've worked closely with over the past few months, to just talk a bit about some of the progress we've made. Yes, with pressuring Comcast, but also, quite frankly, establishing other alternatives and looking at different ways of providing a better product for our families. So Chief Highcupboard, do you want to jump in?
Yep, happy to. Thank you for the question, Councilman Cohen. So we are trying to work through a braided strategy for internet, understanding that Comcast, while they've been fantastic at helping us get several thousand students on in a very short time period, we also know we have to have other options. I will also add that you outlined the students' concerns. I have shared those concerns directly with Comcast myself in my regular conversations with them about how we are to work together to make sure our kids can stay online and stay connected, and also have the supports they need to be successful. So Comcast is one strategy. I know there's some advocacy work going on with the students and other partners to sort of reach out to them and ask them about an extension for the 2 months of free. There also was conversation about extending the sign-on period. As we know, June 30th is the last date right now. Comcast is publicly saying that folks can sign on. There's a conversation right now about extending that to later in the summer for folks to sign on for a first time. We're also looking, as you know, at the mesh network strategy. and thinking about how we're doing a proof of concept right now with 4 schools in the city to think about how we broadcast the school's internet signals out into the community and get the internet into our homes, right? That's a proof of concept project. We are hopeful that it's going to work, but we're just not sure just yet. And then just this Tuesday evening, our school board approved us the purchase of hotspots. So we're going to look at where Comcast is, when where kids are having that service, where the mesh networks are or are not working, and then the other kids will get hotspots that we will be able to keep going on with the internet. So recognizing that the braided strategy has to be there, recognizing that we are, helping support the students' efforts to Comcast to advocate for what their needs are in terms of extended Wi-Fi access, et cetera. But we're doing our best we can. And I want to put a plug in quickly to make sure we're thinking about, as a city, how we are actually providing internet to our residents, right? But that's really the critical piece here. As a district, we really stood this up, and we're very proud that we stood this up in the way we have. But it's going to require a collective support from city council, from our government, from our partners, to really think through how we get our city to have the right internet access.
Yeah, thank you for that. And just to amen your point, I think that, we've seen some really great partnership from Enoch Pratt and what they've been able to do in terms of getting the parking lots and the areas around the libraries to become Wi-Fi hotspots. Also, of course, the mesh network work that Andrew Coy and a ton of other people on the Digital Equity Coalition have been doing. But I do think, to your point, Chief High Hubbard, this is an area where our city needs to think really strategically about internet as a public utility. That in this 21st century, to be without Wi-Fi, and sadly about 40% of our families pre-COVID were without wireline internet, is simply unacceptable, and that we should be thinking strategically about what some form of municipal broadband should look like, because having kids, chickens are coming home to roost on the digital divide right now as children are unable to learn. Second question, Dr. Santoli, again, appreciate the partnership on moving toward an MOU on the Elijah Cummings Healing City Act. Have been working with Chief Warren on that, hoping to have it signed pretty soon. Did want to go back to what my colleague from the 7th District, Councilman Pinkett, was saying about some real concerns about what I perceive to be a mental health crisis that we are going to see as the pandemic, COVID-19, continues to bear down on children and families. I know that from police data, we've seen a significant uptick in child abuse. A lot of it, frankly, unreported for obvious reasons. We know that when young people are, physically out of school, don't have the, that kind of physical support system, I think it's gonna be really tough. So I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about what the sort of like first month or whatever it looks like when young people come back, for young people and also their families, because we know, and I know, and as parents, that this has also been really hard on parents across the socioeconomic spectrum. Just having kids home 24/7 is, I love my kid, but it's a challenge. So I'm curious how we're thinking about that initial point at which young people come back, how we're supporting them and also their families in dealing with some of the trauma and mental health challenges that we know they've been facing.
Sure. And I, as I will just say again, we too anticipate the need to basically reset community in school and reset connections and relationships for young people in school. So, there are different levels of connectedness. For some young people, the mental health challenge has been an ongoing challenge that's just been exacerbated during this period. Dr. DeRaza and I, her need to continue to focus on the immediacy of COVID, had already talked about how do we leverage more mental health supports for families and children in frankly more holistic ways, right? It's not a school issue alone. It's not a health issue alone. It is about treating families. It's about making sure that there are those spaces. I cannot, I'm not going to roll out a plan yet because we're in the middle of still getting our feedback from all of our stakeholders. So we have family surveys going out. We're working with our principals who I think they and teachers have done really yeoman's work in knowing they know which families in their schools are most vulnerable for probably acute and concentrated need. But to your point, all kids are going to need some reentry. So part of what we are doing is thinking about how do we leverage some of the social and emotional supports that are actually embedded in the curriculum and what that looks like in the school day. Who do we prioritize, for example, coming back first? As the announcement was made yesterday about schools being able to be open to small groups of students. We have planned what will be an overwhelmingly virtual summer school. But one of the things that we will be doing is working with some of our partners to say, okay, if we can bring small groups back safely, who are the young people we prioritize, right? Because that's also an equity question, right? It's one thing to, people kind of throw out equity. Well, equity also means that there may be young people who are prioritized to have some of those in-person experiences, whether it's arts. We know, and I heard over and over again and hear continually from young people, the number who actually view engagement in art as a healing experience, right? So it is absolutely mental health, but I think that there's a full spectrum of wellness, which is why, and you know this, we've grounded our work in this idea of young people as whole people, right? Not as just a constant state of brokenness, but how do we make sure across the continuum that young people who need serious mental health supports from professionals like psychologists and social workers get that. But what young people have said and what teachers have said to me is that those who have been able to really maintain relationships with young people through this period have done the best. But even those who have done the best work are concerned that they have the space to reestablish relationships with new groups of kids this year, right? And so many teachers have said, yes, I've been able to keep in contact because I have a relationship already, because I know a young person will call me or a family will call a principal and say, this is where we are. We haven't, we had to move, right, because of COVID, because we had a family member that was sick. It's not that we just dropped off the face of the earth, and they're going to call a principal. They're not calling central office with that. That's what our ground level folks know. And so part of what we're working on now in a lot of our surveying of families, and frankly, working with community organizations that also are going to know in large part where some of the most acute need is, queuing up and frankly prioritizing young people who have had the most challenging experiences connecting to distance learning, young people who have been in the most precarious physical learning environments, and then a number of our students with disabilities who we know have not gotten a full complement of the services that they're entitled to that also have mental health implications. So that's going into the work of how we prioritize. More than happy to come back to City Council and the Education Subcommittee and give you an update as we get our plans together. Okay. I'll round it up. So more than happy to do that and come back as we have more detail.
Appreciate that. And last thing I would say on that note is your workforce as well. I think this has been extremely hard on teachers and principals and other staff. And so just want to put in a plug for, their well-being, their wellness. I just think this has been really hard.
No, it has. And our human capital team has done a great job in really making sure that we're upping the kinds of services we're providing to our team members and to our staff, because you're absolutely right. We have teachers who have experienced the death of multiple family members, and then to have to get online and support online learning is an extra hurdle that they have to overcome. So
Trying to get their own kids online.
absolutely. Yep, agreed.
Thank you. Councilwoman Clark.
Thank you, Dr. Satsalisis. I've thought of you so many times this summer, and how heroic you are. Grateful I am. On behalf of all of the kids.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Really, I do. I think about you, and I think it's amazing that you're just still here and smiling. I'd like to talk about something, and then I'd like to tell you about Reach High School for a minute, and then that'll be it. I'm working with zero waste, and so is actually so are all my colleagues in the city council. And zero waste meaning it's really all about stopping the old ways of incineration and land using and land burying of trash and all, and beginning to create whole small businesses out of converting certain recycled materials into things for sale, into taking compost, which is 25% of what we burn in down at Bresco is food. You take that out of that cycle and put it into compost and use that to create fertilizer and other things. Anyway, so we've had a report from that Public Works has. We've had a report from the advocates consultant, and they're all kind of saying the same thing. Let's go. Let's do these things. And the only reason I mention it now is that one of the things that we're proposing is that a lot of people don't even get their recycled pickups. Well, nobody does right now. Generally speaking, there's a lot of neighborhoods or blocks that aren't getting recycling. And anyway, we want the city to help us provide enough containers for compost and for recycling for 200,000 households, okay? So that it's starting from the ground up, not just, up here.
Yes.
People buy in. Okay. I'm telling you all that because you're doing a great job at helping our kids prepare for work, prepare for jobs, prepare for the opportunities of the future. So what I'm saying is the only way we're going to get the word out about what things to recycle and what things to compost, because of course it's not perfect. You got to know the list, is kids. So maybe youth work kids going door to door in the summertime in their neighborhoods with the list that they have a grant that has a list of everything and talking to people about it. Look, we're getting this bin. Here it is. But here's how you do it. And here's why. No more smoke in the air. No more landfills smelling up the place. So I mention all that. So if you could put it kind of in the back of your mind and think about, because what it's really about is creating new jobs for the future, which has been done in other parts of the country. Small businesses are created.
Yes.
Jobs. That's one thing. The other thing is, I just have to tell you this because I'm like you. Like, I went to a meeting. Actually, it was online. It's not online. It was virtual. And I learned a horrible thing today, and I just want to pass it on. It was horrible for me. And you probably don't know it either. But our beautiful, beautiful new Reach High School is, we're going to be part of the field and stadium that Rec and Parks is building next door to. But part of the deal was, okay, Reach can't have its own stadium, but it can be next door to Rec and Parks, and they'll kind of customize it so when Reach has a big game or something, it'll look good. It'll be very usable, and it'll look like a high school place.
Mm-hmm.
Well, today I'm asking, how is this project coming? Thanks Rec and Park for holding it up while we got the extra plan done. Thank you for the money that came from the schools to design, to incorporate, the scoreboard, the bathrooms, the storage. They took them out. So basically, they're getting ready now to build that stadium without the bathrooms, without the storage for the kids. They are expanding the seating, and it freaked me out. It ruined my day. I'm just telling you, all help does. You work to get the development, the planning money in so they could incorporate the plan. They've done that. But now they're going to start without those things I've mentioned. And I'm really upset about it. Now, the good thing is, and then I'm stopping. The good thing is they're going to design around it. So what they're going to do is they're going to build a stadium, but make it so that if we ever do get the money for the bathrooms and the storage, they'll be able to fix it in, put it in, without major tearing the place apart to do it. But I know how hard you worked to get that.
Yes.
We know where it was supposed to come from, the Stadium Authority. Sorry, I didn't say that. And they didn't do it. And nobody told me till today. So, all right, ladies and gentlemen, that was just a little story out of the 14th District, Clifton Park. No, we understand, because we all worked hard to put the people. And not only did they not put them together, they didn't tell us.
So,
yeah.
So Councilwoman Clark, I'm gonna ask Chief Perkins Cohen to speak to this particular in a little bit, but I also wanted you to know, given what you started out with in your comments. That I did just get a message from Liz Marquetta, who heads up our food and nutrition operation. She wanted you to make sure. Yes, she wanted to make sure that you knew that we are actually poised to pilot composting at a few schools, and we actually have grant support from NRDC as well as other waste reduction efforts. So we're actually, you probably know this, we've transitioned to compostable trays and cutlery.
I do.
Yes, I knew you would know that, but we are actually really excited to be part of that. I was glad that that Liz forwarded that. We also, it would be wonderful in terms of future work, advocacy work for City Council, if we actually had a city composting facility.
Yes, don't we need one?
Would actually, now, again, I know it's on a long list of needs, but I'll just point that out. But I did think that you
we want these things now.
Yes. So I did want to say that.
Well, that's great news. And I want you to get, Benjamin Franklin High School and all that.
Yes.
And all those young people down there, they're the ones that are leading this whole zero waste project in the whole city. And now we've got DPW agreeing. We've got ourselves. Only one way to spread the word effectively about getting it from the grassroots up. Kids.
That's right.
That's the only way to get that educated across the city. So good. And let's find us a place to take that compost to.
Absolutely.
But not on an MTA route, because we'll never get there.
Chief Perkins Cohen, did you want to speak to the reach issue that the councilwoman surfaced, please?
Sure, I'll be happy to speak to REACH, but I do want to say first, just a huge shout out to Liz for all the work she's done. She has really taken the work seriously of making sure our food program is getting fresh fruits and vegetables. We use our own farm for that, and she worked with students last year to switch us over to paper trays so that they're compostable. So she's done a ton of work on that. So yeah, we're excited to be able to compost too. And you know, I do have a connection at YouthWorks if you want to talk to them about jobs for kids.
I heard that you did. I heard
somebody over there.
Yeah.
I can stay in touch.
Thank you.
Sure. So
thank you very much. I wasn't looking for a solution here tonight to either problem. I was just, well, first of all, I wanted to talk about this because we need our school children to be the gospel sayers about what it all means and how to do it. And the other is, man, it's like I was at this hearing and now I'm here and that's all I can talk about. Give me my storage cabinets.
So the challenge with REACH, so the REACH project is moving forward, and we are really excited about our partnership with Rec and Parks on that, because that field is going to be much nicer than anything that we could have done. It will be an AstroTurf field. It will have lights. Like we said, it will have a scoreboard. We are using our resources to add the seats that we need because we need more.
Yes, I know. Thank you.
In order to be able to host games, so we need more seats. We're adding a practice track for the students because, you know, REACH has a good track team. And so it was a question whether they would practice. So this will add it won't be a full, you couldn't have competitions there, but it'll be a practice track so kids could practice there. So those are all good things. We did want to be able to do the bathrooms, the bathrooms.
And the storage.
And the storage was an addition. That was not part of the original scope. But
yes, it was. Oh, yes, it was.
No, it wasn't.
Oh, you're right. We brought that in. Yeah.
We brought that in later. We all, the original scope was included. There's other pieces I mentioned. And then later we all kind of agreed it really would be nice to have bathrooms there. It's a challenge of where people will go to the bathroom, and the storage is a challenge. We wanted to be able to do it, but frankly, that would have had to come out of our general funds, and it was just something with all the demands on our general funds. We've had a lot of cabinet meetings where we sat and ranked all the many wish list items that we were trying to fund, and this was one we just could not commit to and couldn't fit in with all the other demands.
Okay, next time let us know, and let us go wave a couple more flags. But thank you for all you've done, and thanks. I didn't come to this meeting thinking I was going to walk away with, you know, restrooms and storage when I left, but I just wanted to say it out loud because we've all worked very hard, and we'll get it in the long run. We just, you know, young people, but they want it now. But okay, but thanks. You did everything you could.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilman Schleifer.
I'm good, thank you.
Did we do Councilwoman Sneed yet?
No. Thank
You're up,
you.
ma'am.
Thank you. I just have a question for right now in reference to, I think you mentioned it earlier with some of our students who just may struggle in school just a little bit. And so I'm curious to know, since we are not in school during a normal school year, what's going to happen with summer school, and is there money allocated for teachers to teach, and will this happen virtually? What's going to happen July 1 with our students?
Sure.
And everyone didn't pass. Like, I would like to think that all of our students definitely passed, but I'm sure there's some who did not.
Sure. No, thank you for the question, Councilwoman Sneed. So one of the things that was true up until today, and will still be for the most part true, is that we will be having summer school. Summer school was originally planned and will still primarily be virtual, with some of the shifts in kind of the phases. We know clearly we'll be waiting for the mayor's word about Baltimore City, but what we have begun doing and will begin doing is planning how do we prioritize bringing groups of students back for summer learning opportunities who might be in most need. And so as I referenced earlier, for example, we know, to no one's surprise, that there are certain young people who just couldn't get connected, right? So those would be young people who, students who we would prioritize for summer learning. The other piece is we know that there are young people, a matter of fact, one of my own daughters, she just did not really connect with distance learning. It was not her thing. She didn't like it. She's like, Mom, I want to go back to school. And we have young people who are going to need and benefit from more time with face-to-face. So we will really be prioritizing that. The second piece is, and when I say assess, I don't mean in an oppressive way, like we sit kids down and have them take a 3-hour test. But what we are going to try to do is work to get a handle on which students lost the most ground or did not move as fast just because of life spinning around them over the last few months. And how do we prioritize some of them coming back early in the summer? Now, that being said, we know we're not going to be able to get to everybody. We're fortunate in Baltimore that we had, we have always prioritized summer school. And because of the work that the city does and city agencies do and partners have done, unlike colleagues in other jurisdictions, we had already planned for summer programming. So what we've done now is really made the shift with a lot of our partners to bring those summer offerings online. Virtual. Thank you, Councilwoman Clark. I do the same thing. And so, we've moved a lot of those offerings virtually, but we will also be working. We know we have partners who have the capacity to take small groups of students, and so we'll be doing some of that. That'll give us the time to assess where young people are in a much less kind of formalized testing kind of situation and much more as part of the work. And so frankly, getting connected. Please go ahead.
So the money is there and we'll have additional funds going towards that because of COVID
So no, what I would say is that we had already budgeted for summer learning. And so what we're doing is reprioritizing which students get in front summer learning, right? So we had summer learning in our budget. So what we've done is thought about how to do summer learning differently. And then we also have a network of partners that we work with, Young Audiences is one of our arts partners that we work with over the summer. And that funding comes traditionally from a variety of places, some of which is in the city schools budget, but quite frankly, some of that is funded by the philanthropic community, other city agencies. We partner with Rec and Parks and Youth Works. That is wildly popular and, one of the strongest youth employment programs in the country. They are committed to continuing to provide young people jobs this summer. And so we'll be matching, for example, we have, high school students who, because of our expansion of advanced placement this year, so that every school in every zip code offers advanced placement now. We know that some young people need additional road to get to that. We also have young people who just didn't connect. And so some of it is credit recovery, as you referenced, and we want to get some young people to graduation who were close, but did not make it, as you noted. But we also just have young people who fall in the middle, who just because of, access and other things going on in the middle of, frankly, a crisis, we would target first. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so yes, and I know that everyone won't be in there. So I guess a part of the question is, are we looking for, or are we going to have additional resources allocated to going into the following year to help those students who fall through the cracks? Like, what's going to happen to them who are not graduating, who have not been identified, who didn't make it into the programs? Will it be money for the kids that fall through the cracks?
No, that is a fabulous question, and it was one that we discussed with the House Appropriations Committee. The bottom line is, we know, for example, the American Association of School Administrators and budget officers came out with an estimate just last week that just to provide enough PPE, cleaning materials, social distancing, kinds of routines, just for safety, just to safely open schools, would cost approximately $486 a student. That is before we get to your question, which is how are we actually making up some of that loss? And so, one of the things that I've said when I've talked to our state senators at the federal level, as well as our legislators here, is, we've been pretty forthright that if you want extra time, that there's a cost to that. I will also say that because of the work that Dr. Durant and Chief High Hubbard are doing, we are also beginning to work with some of our local, local community organizations and, frankly, some of our local Black membership organizations to see how we can leverage resources across the community to provide additional tutoring for young people when they return, because to your point, we know we're not going to be able to get everybody over summer, which is why we're going to have to prioritize the most vulnerable students. But to your point, it's got, additional time and cost to accelerate, but we are also, rethinking some of our curriculum patterns. That's going to be the distance learning PD for teachers. But, in the end, that cost of $486 per pupil, that was a national analysis, by the way, that was not our school district, does not even begin to take into account the additional learning time and resources we're going to need to make up some of that gap. So, it's a both and. We're doing the work. We're going to continue to press forward with what we have, but we're going to have to be realistic around, the fact that $486 a pupil in and of itself would mean an increased cost of $38 million to city schools just to implement CDC guidelines, and does not incorporate what would be needed to, provide all of the young people returning who are going to need to make up ground.
You might have already said this already, and sorry if I missed it. Are any cuts being made to teachers and staff? I know sometimes you make cuts during budget season. Are we keeping all of our teachers on?
Right.
Or will there be cuts to teachers?
No, I mean, we as a district, and I will tell you, I am in many, many national meetings, have been in many, many national meetings across the last 3 months. And frankly, at least for fiscal year 21, this coming school year, we are, and there's no other way to say it, we are incredibly blessed. I have colleagues who now are having to slash teacher staffing for this coming school year because their budgets are getting cut by anywhere from 10 to 15 to 20%. We are fortunately not in that situation for this year. We are able to make those adjustments, but I don't want to also underestimate or undercommunicate that for fiscal year 22, with Kerwin not passing, with additional costs, it is at some point we too are going to have to face some questions if there is not the federal and state response to make up some of the ground. The example I gave today to the House Appropriations Committee is on any given day in Baltimore City Public Schools, we feed 100,000 meals to students. That is revenue generating. meals and that we get reimbursed for throughout this crisis, our peak was serving 15,000 meals a day. So what that means is all of the revenue of the difference between serving 100,000 meals a day to 10 to 15,000 meals a day. We did not lay off any of our staff. We were committed to making sure that we helped to provide stability. Frankly, a lot of our food nutrition workers are residents of Baltimore City and some of the most vulnerable work groups. And, I, along with the board, made the commitment that, we were not going to make those cuts there. However, moving forward, when we look to the future, those are some of the reckonings we're going to have to make. So right now, the CARES Act is helping stem some of that, but our losses around meals is going to be somewhere around the $25 million mark just for that. And that's before you get into the cost for PPE. So I'm just flagging that for folks. So no, we are not for now. But part of our charge, my charge is, and the board's is also to look proactively towards the future. And FY22 has a whole lot of question marks on it.
Thank you. Those are my two questions. Thank you.
We have done Sneed, Clark, nothing for Schleifer. We did McCray, we did Middleton, we did Cohen, we did Costello, we did Pinkett, we did Burnett. I think, yes, we did Burnett. We did the president. Okay, President Scott, you're up.
Actually, Councilman Burnett is up. He's up first. I was actually talking to him on the phone. He's coming right now.
Councilman Burnett.
May I be excused?
Councilwoman, you are frankly free to do as you please.
Thank you.
Thank you for asking.
Thank you. Of course.
I'm glad I could help with that answer.
Oh, I bet you are. Thank you.
Have a fine evening. I'll see you bright and early tomorrow.
Yes, sir. Yes, boss.
Not your boss. Want to be clear on that.
Yeah.
Councilman Burnett.
My brother.
So the last question that I was hoping we could get an update on, Dr. Santoli. I think it was maybe 2 years ago. Sorry, I feel like I'm in a time warp, but there was actually hosted a meeting about school rezoning at Edmondson High School. I know you were doing those all over the city. Hadn't heard anything back from that analysis. I know that there was a study done around rezoning and right-sizing schools. And it sort of ties into my earlier line of question around transportation, kids getting to and from schools. Can you provide us an update on what you all are looking at around school rezoning?
Sure, and thank you for the question, Councilman. So where we are is we had the study, and we are in the process. We were getting ready to broach some of that, and we had COVID. I think we had originally said we were going to do this in 2019, 18. And we had the feedback, and we had to review the report. And then I think the actual community feedback around some of the proposals for adjustment that we still have to do. But no, you're correct in terms of the fact that was on, we were going to study and then review those studies and then begin taking feedback from the community and then, at some point do proposals. We have not, that has not been online. And then, quite frankly, the last few months, it hasn't either. But you are correct that the study was done so that we could actually see what some of the proposals are, but there is going to need to be some kind of feedback process before we come up. And we did get some of that, but we're going to have to do more conversation with community as we put some of that forth. But we do not have progress to report on that right now. I would ask either Chief Washington or Chief Perkins Cohen to weigh in on that if there's something that I am missing or, that's not coming to my mind immediately.
So this is Lynette. I think that the only piece is that some of the feedback that we received initially, those 2 years ago, we have been taking into consideration when we look at our portfolio. So every year we look at the portfolio across the board on the closures and some of those different things like that. And so even though we have not gone through the formal process of rezoning, some of that feedback is considered as we make portfolio decisions.
Yeah, and I guess as you make progress, that'd be helpful.
Councilman, can I interrupt you for 1 second? I'm sorry. After Councilman Burnett, next up is President Scott. Thank you, Councilman. Sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, just it'd be helpful to get that feedback and what you're working on. And again, just a lot of what I wanted to talk about today is just focused on what I've been hearing in my district, which is people are really concerned about the closures, and then the second piece is how far the kids are traveling to get to and from school. And that zoning piece, I know, contributes a lot to all of this sort of ecosystem around where kids live and how far they have to go to get to school on time. And yeah, that was actually the only the third question I had. Everything else has been touched on. So guess we'll hand it over to President Scott.
No, but thank you for that, Councilman Burnett. And we will kind of make a note to make sure that we circle back with you on that. And knowing you will ask if we forget to circle back on that, which is a good thing.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Council President Scott, did you have a question?
Thank you. Sorry about that, you guys.
It's all right.
Thank you. Actually, one of the things I just wanted to follow up on something, Dr. Santoli, just give me 1 second.
Sir. Sure.
And so where are we on the significant increase in fine arts teachers that I know we've been working on that. Where are we at?
Yes, and I'll ask Chief Grant Skinner to give you some accurate data. We did continue to make progress in that, but he'll have more exact numbers for you, Council President. So Chief Grant Skinner.
Hi again, and I can say that last year we added a couple dozen new fine arts teachers through the budget process, and we're very successful in starting the year with just under 100% of those positions filled, and we had partners who were very helpful in both in universities and other partners advocating for the arts to help us make sure that we could make that progress. I am happy to follow up with additional numbers of what's in the budget for next year. I don't have that right in front of me right now.
Thank you. Thank you. My last question, give me 1 second here.
No problem.
So this is just a general one. Just talking about, and especially now with COVID-19, and I don't know if this will, I'm assuming that it will impact the budget, but talking about how we're now tracking like the community's use of school facilities, be it like, maybe people who are using the field or the gym or a particular part of the building for some kind of event, and how we're tracking that, but then also now due to us not being in the buildings for a month on end, how, if any, is that going to have an impact on the operations, and how we think about, have you guys thought about how we're going to roll that back out once and when we're opening buildings back up?
No, that is a great question, and I will honestly say I don't think we have a plan for that right now. I think it's the right flag, Council President. I will say this, that we continue to watch, as I know, you do, and the rest of the city, with what kind of reopening looks like. And based on what's open. And a great example even now is around, childcare facilities, right? We have outside folks, and I know this is not what you're talking about, but, we have outside folks who use some of our facilities for childcare. And with the opening up of that, these are questions we have to ask ourselves. And, one of those is, our team under Dr. Washington's leadership has been, really looking into, for example, air filtration systems, right, in schools. And what we know about the spread of the virus with those systems, does that take certain buildings offline for community use? What are the implications for cleaning costs? We already were really trying to be responsive to, our need to have, particularly our 21st century school buildings, stay in good condition and stay clean without taxing community organizations and community members too much, charging too much for the space. Well, now, it was already something we were working through. If you add on the sanitizing requirements based on that, we're going to need to figure that out. But I won't say now that we have an answer for you. You certainly should keep asking, and we will. Dr. Washington, I don't know if you want to add anything in terms of how we're thinking about this, but I would just say for right now, Council President, I don't have a clear plan for you to roll out right now. And Dr. Washington probably doesn't either. So I hear.
Okay, I just want to thank. It's something that I've been asking other folks because I think we have to think about it, and then to that end. And I know just from talking to some of the folks, but I think it's important for my counterparts to hear and for us to have a discussion about too. When we come back in the fall and how fall sports is going to look, which I am getting a lot of pressure being so involved in school sports as I am, and I'm telling folks like I'm just not comfortable with it. But can you talk about like what I know that Mrs. Bird and people have been talking about that with the coaches and people, but how extremely difficult that's going to be, especially in the fall for basically every sport except cross country, right? Like that's the reality of where we live.
No, and I actually, also got a call, I think 2 weeks ago, and a brief conversation with BTU President Brown about this issue as well. So what I will say is we know now that MSDE is signaling that at least practices can begin in certain sports as long as they occur outdoors. We have been, I along with my superintendent colleagues across the state, one of our big requests from MSDE is that they give very clear guidance on sports for the reasons that and can imagine. To be frank, I don't want to be making decisions about contact sports like football and how and when those can occur without some consideration of the medical implications. We do know we are kind of mobilizing now to put plans in place for the practices, but we are awaiting the guidance from the state athletic association about what actual play will look like in the fall. Because as you rightly noted, I'm glad that badminton can occur without contact, but that's not really going to help us out the way we need to. So we are sticking very closely, and we continue to ask that, and that's true, by the way, of LEAs across the state. Everybody has similar questions, so we'll keep you updated.
Thank you. And then Dr. Santoli says the last thing. And I know you talked about it earlier, but I think it's a critical point to bring up. One of something that I think that we're going to have to do advocacy, and I've already signed myself up for that, when we're talking about coming back and with, them saying summer school and all these other things can happen. Well, for our kids, that means that they have to bring MTA to a better place because they can't get to school if they can't get on the bus because the bus is running so infrequently. So I just want to point that out for my colleagues, that we have to do a lot of advocacy with our folks in the state level to help them understand that, unlike everywhere else, most of our children are not catching a yellow cheese bus.
No, and I will just reiterate that I appreciate you and the full council's advocacy around that. That helps us tremendously.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Vice Chair Pinkett. You're good. Okay. Good, I'm good, we're good. Vice President Middleton.
Just two quick follow-ups.
Hang on one second, Madam Vice
sorry.
President.
I'm sorry.
After you, we're going to go to Councilman Cohen. Thank you.
Okay, just two quick follow-up, I guess, information, listening to some of your answers from my colleagues. There's a Baltimore City Public School System farm?
Yes, there is. Great Kids Farm. It's fabulous.
Who's the contact for that?
So Cynthia Shea does a lot of work with Great Kids Farm out of Food and Nutrition, and she is part of Liz Marquetta's team. But it is a wonderful place. It's the place I go when I need a breather. It's wonderful. We have, it's a wonderful resource for city schools. We have field trips that align to our curriculum throughout the year, but absolutely invite you or any member of City Council to come up for a visit, because it's a really special place.
All right, because I don't know if there's a connect with the Park Heights Urban Farm Gardens with Farmer Chippy, but I'll talk with Cynthia.
Yes.
And then the other question you had mentioned, I guess you're going to be needing tutors when the school opens, so the children can catch up. So who's the contact for that? Because I have a few organizations and also
Fabulous.
some older adults.
Fabulous. No, please. So you should reach out to Chief Tina Hike-Hubbard or Dr. Durant. But yes, we are very excited about that. And one of the things I didn't get to mention is we are hoping that we also get some resources to bring on board some of our own city college students. So we're looking at partnerships with some of our local universities like Morgan and Coppin and other institutions, to see if they have interest in this as well, because we think, it's a double benefit. But yes, you can reach out to either of them.
Okay, I know Tina well, so I'll reach out to her.
Sure.
All
Wonderful.
Right. Thank you.
That's great.
All right. I see Chair Costello has stepped away, so I think Councilman Cohen, were you next? Who was next?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, you go right ahead.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. I appreciate it. And nice to see you.
Good to see you.
Dr. Santoli says, one question I have, as we think about the school choice process and some of the challenges that we've seen around, just families that, unfortunately, I think the idea of school choice remains something of a misnomer for some of our families, in that because of what my colleagues have lifted up around transportation, because of access at the elementary and then middle level to being able to fully access the process. We know that in the end, we have some major equity concerns around who is able to best leverage the school choice system. Was wondering if you could provide a quick update on the work that's gone on in order to make, I sort of remember having this conversation with your predecessor, and he was a big champion for school choice, and remember just feeling like it's a great system in theory if it were really a free market and if everyone had the same access to information and transportation and everything else. But we know that in reality, it can, in some ways, exacerbate inequalities that already exist in the system if not done in a really thoughtful way. So I was wondering if you could provide some update about where we're headed, and the work that still needs to be done on making school choice more of an equitable system.
No, absolutely. And thank you, Councilman Cohen. I will, the first piece I will say, and then, at the same time, invite Chief High Hubbard to also share some of her insights on where we're going directionally, is that part of the reason why we moved enrollment choice and transfer under the chief for family and community engagement and communication was because the large numbers of studies and feedback that we received pointed to exactly what you just stated, that we knew that not all of our families had access to the information about choice. And so one of the major improvements Chief High Hubbard and the communications team have made this year is really trying to be more explicit. We tend to use kind of formal language and nice pictures like in our choice guides. But when families in the know what it really takes, then it puts other families at a disadvantage. And so we have worked to, number one, be far more explicit about the progress. We've also worked, and this is one of the reasons, by the way, in budgeting, that we really provided strong guidance to schools, especially elementary and middle schools, to have guidance counselors, or a very robust, and frankly, not as robust and consistently robust across the city, guidance at the school level for parents. There are some schools where we knew, families are getting oriented from 4th grade on what it takes to go through middle school choice or high school choice. There were other schools where you're pretty much on your own. So we've made some efforts there to really, through our college and career office, say, okay, what are those resources? And what basically, how do you navigate this system that is choice? The other piece that we have done is we have expanded what some of the quality learning experiences look like. So our middle school task force, for example, said if people are only looking at ingenuity and advanced academics as rigorous academic offerings, then sure, you're looking at a formal program. Well, what we did was we added honors courses at 20 schools, and those honors courses look frankly no different than advanced academics. So you can track advanced academics, but we actually said it should not depend on the school you go to whether you have honors classes. So we've done that. We've also really looked at how do we make sure that, when we're having conversations about portfolio and we look across the city, it is larger K-8 schools that have more resources to provide the kind of middle grades programming that I know, and frankly families know should be the kinds of experiences like full-time art, like real world language, like having a school musical, right? Those are the kinds of things that should be in those programs. And so we've been really working hard to make sure that that we have those options available. Are we completely there yet? No. But if you are to look across the city now and see where some of that programming is now versus where it was 3 to 4 years ago, I think you would see more of that. Chief High Hubbard can add, but I do think this piece about information arming for families on how to navigate, rather than relying on what I like to call informal playground networks of privilege, where if you go on the right playground on the right day, you get the information. I think she and her team are doing a really good job, but we are not nearly there yet. To make sure that those networks are not the only place that families get information. So Tina, I don't know if you want to add anything to Councilman Cohen's question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you summed it up well, Dr. Santoli. The only thing I would add are 2 things. One, we did an analysis last summer of looking at the summer transfer window where we see about 10,000 families coming in for summer transfer window. And during that time, we realized almost a third of those families were coming in for middle school choice. And when we looked at the choice structure and realized that we only were actually offering 5 citywide options for middle schools, that many of our families, as Dr. Santoli explained a few minutes ago, they want a K-8 option. So we actually then opened up our K-8 options in our choice process, again, to allow a more equitable and fair opportunity for families to get into those schools, right? There's a lot of work that needs to be done. We're going to continue to iterate as we move forward. And we'll also offer that we are recognizing that Mervo, Carver, Evanston, et cetera, are schools that had entrance criteria, but because of changes in CTE requirements for the state, we are now taking away the entrance criteria. So for this fall, that criteria still stands. But for the next choice round of process, we will remove that criteria. So we are going to continue to iterate and revamp our choice system, and also really just stand up high quality options for all of our students in all of our schools, expanding our AP options, et cetera. But it is about making sure we have a more equitable system, and transportation obviously is an issue too. If you can't get there, it's not really a choice. So there are a lot of moving parts to it, but just know that as part of reimagining our ECT office, we are committed to also looking through and improving choice as we move forward.
Great, thank you. My last question for tonight, just want to sort of lift up some of the challenges that I know our ELL families are having right now. We know that this pandemic has been extremely tough on particularly our Latinx community. We've seen that in Southeast Baltimore. We know that because of changes to the Fair Student Funding formula, to the how we calculate poverty, that schools with high concentrations of ELL had lost some money. I know that you all had done some work to equalize that. Wanted to get a status update on where we are in terms of our high concentration, our schools with high concentrations of ELL students, and just knowing that this has been a particularly tough time for families that struggle with language access.
No, absolutely, Councilman Cohen. I know that Chief Perkins Cohen continues to really lead a lot of our efforts to push and advocate at both the primarily at the state level, the local level, but I also have had conversations at the federal level on, what are the ways that we actually can reconfigure law and the legislative mandates in a way that gives us more flexibility. Title I, is still a bear. We continue, and you'll see in the budget, and it's not nearly enough. And so believe me, I'm not purporting that it is, but you'll see in this budget, continue to use our general fund dollars to the extent that we can to supplement some of those schools. But I will say, each year I hold my breath to see which schools with high concentrations of Latinx families are going to fall off that list. We have one or two that it's really an income issue, but for the most part, I hold my breath every year and say which ones are going to fall off, and we can continue to try to use that money creatively. But, I will acknowledge, sir, that it is not, it's not the level of funding it should be. And so, the extent to which we can find flexibilities in grant dollars that we can, work with schools to find more of that money, and the extent to which in our discussions, back when Kerwin was a thing and it actually had already passed, that was one of the things we advocated for, that I gave credit to our legislative team, that we really pushed for hard in the Kerwin legislation, was to more, not fully correct, but to more substantially correct the undercounting of our Latinx families for all the reasons you and I both know. And, when you're targeted, you are not going to, I would not, be running to give my information for those methods that are traditionally used. And so, that's why we were pushing hard for there to just be a weight, right? Like, don't put the burden on families and schools, to risk their well-being. We should just count them because we know they're there. So it's not a perfect answer. It's not the answer. I wish I could come here and tell you it had been fully rectified. We were very hopeful if Kerwin had passed that we would be much closer to resolving that. But, we're going to have to continue this year to take money from our general fund to patch together. But, from a principal standpoint, if I were a school leader in those schools, I still wouldn't be satisfied because it's not fully what your students deserve, nor do they need. And, as principals have told me, and I know is the case, the poverty hasn't gone away. We're just not counting it. And that's why, things like the census do matter. And I'm not doing a, PSA, but that stuff matters. So it's not a perfect answer. I don't know, Chief Perkins-Cohen, if you have something that you'd want to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, I would. Everything you said is right. We have worked really hard to get this, to try different avenues to get this fixed. I think we did a study last year to look at the collection of forms and whether the collection of forms would help with that. And I think found a lot of challenges with collecting forms. We don't have in other jurisdictions that are not farms districts. They can do what we used to do, which is when you get towards the end of the collection period, you can say that you have the threat of not providing lunch to students if they don't turn in their form, which unfortunately is a way that you get a lot of forms back. And we're a CEP district, which is wonderful because all of our students eat, but we don't have that stick. We only have the carrots. And so we really found that even in the schools that really did a really great job of collecting forms, none of them created the form collection that they had before we were a farms district. And many of them were well below it. And so that was a real challenge. We did get a study in the Kerwin legislation that, assuming we get the veto override, will allow us to look at a way of counting poverty that we're very interested in, which would actually look at a variety of neighborhood factors to count poverty. And hospitals use it to assess the poverty rate, or actually the health indicators of the families they serve by looking at the zip codes of the families they serve, and it gives them indications of the rates of diabetes and asthma and other health-related conditions that they could expect based on those zip codes. We have a study, we got authority to do a study in the Kerwin that would allow us to look at whether that's a better way for the state to count poverty, which would give an apples to apples comparison across jurisdictions, those who collect farms forms and those like us who don't. And so we're very interested in that. Dr. Santolisis has also advocated at the federal level because we tried to get some things into some of these federal legislation to address the issue, the Title I issue. So we've really been trying at all levels to get this done, and we're lucky that our delegation was very supportive, and we got some things in Kerwin. But in the short term, we're protected kind of in the general fund, at the general fund level, but it is a longer term problem. And of course, if we don't get an override in Kerwin, we have a problem too. So it is something we keep watching. It's a very frustrating challenge. And as Dr. Santolisis said, we have really tried a variety of creative ways to make up the gap by providing dedicating general funds to make up for some of the research, provide additional resources to English language learners who are in those schools. But it is a vexing problem, and it's one that is really doing a disservice to some of our schools and our students.
Yep. Appreciate that. And, it is certainly a pain point for those schools and families, young people. And, last thing I would say on that note is I think that this is an area where the city is at your service. If there is anything we can do, I know that this is this is a real issue for Mayor Young, for President Scott, for certainly Catalina, who runs MEMA, that if there are any creative solutions that we can bring to bear as well. I know that there's full interest on the part of the city to also be a partner, knowing that when it comes to formulas, we don't have jurisdiction over that, but whatever we can do, I want to, just offer it.
No, I appreciate that. And, we will think creatively about a way that there might be able to, we might be able to partner on that, because it is an absolutely ongoing challenge.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there any other council member that has a question or comment? Going once? Going twice? Well, we're going to go in recess. Thank you, Dr. Santolisis and your team. And again, we are all here to help and work with you. And because we do have some trying times ahead, but we are just a phone call away. So thank you for taking the time for sharing everything that you're doing and all the help that you need. And again, we're there for you.
No, much
Everybody have a
appreciated.
good. And we're now in recess until tomorrow morning. And we're having a
That's
long day,
9:30,
council members.
Councilwoman. 9:30 tomorrow morning.
9:30 tomorrow morning, and I think we're going to have a long day.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye-bye.